On this super review, we're going to take a look at the Minigo 3 action camera. So like any good motorcyclist, I've got a GoPro. But at this point, this GoPro is pretty old and I've been considering getting a new camera, but new GoPros are pretty expensive. But I have been noticing a series of really low budget action cameras showing up on Amazon in like the sub $100 range, right? A new GoPro is gonna cost around 200 bucks. And some of these new cameras, they advertise that they do 4K. They advertise a lot of features and they are under 100 bucks. Enter the Minigo 3. So not only is the Minigo under 100 bucks, the Minigo is only a $50 camera. 50 bucks for 4K and a ton of accessories as far as I can tell on the Amazon listing. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do, I'm gonna unbox the Minigo. I'm going to play around with the camera a little bit and see, how was the functionality? Because frankly, the functionality, even on a GoPro that costs hundreds of dollars, not that great. Maybe, we'll see how the Minigo does. Let's check it out. All right, so you got the Minigo action camera here. Let's go ahead and unbox it. Okay, that was a pretty quick unboxing. This thing did actually come in like a little plastic bag that I already took it out of because I didn't want it to crinkle in the microphone, but this is seriously how it came. There is no box, no other packaging except for the container itself, but let's go ahead and open it up and see what you get inside the Minigo. All right, so here is everything that you get in the box of the Minigo. Holy, all right, so you get $40 or $50. You get about $50 worth of accessories, different mounting brackets, you get a different back for the case, you get a waterproof case, and then they throw in this 4K extra camera for free. That's probably not actually how it works out, but this is seriously a surprising amount of stuff. Now you've got a handful of different straps, Velcro straps. They throw in some zip ties, which I guess that's pretty useful. You get, of course, a USB micro charging cable. And actually one thing that's interesting is that this comes with a battery in it, and then it also comes with a spare battery. So you get two batteries with this thing. I'm not sure what the battery life is gonna be. This battery is a 900 milliamp hour battery. So it's got some decent juice, but we'll see how long that lasts inside of a 4K action camera. But the device itself is super lightweight. It's got a nice little screen on the back of it and a couple of buttons. So in terms of buttons, we've got up and down arrows on the left side of it. We got an OK button on the top of it, and we have a power button on the front of it. So in total, 4 buttons. It's got HDMI out on this side as well as the USB micro charging port, and then it's also got a spot for a SD micro card. Obviously there's no dearth of mounting options here. I think the ones that are going to be interesting to me is that you do get this case, which is, they say, waterproof, and it has a backing on it which is not waterproof. And if this is like my GoPro, the difference was that the reason you might want to use the non-waterproof version is just that the audio can come through a little bit clearer. This is a nice little clip mount with a tripod screw on the bottom of it. That's useful, and it's still got a little pass-through so that you can see the screen. This mount is good for attaching to your hair. And then these two mounts here are good for sticking onto things, right? They've got an adhesive base, and there's actually some replacement adhesives provided as well. So this is probably what you would use to attach it to, say, like a helmet on a motorcycle. One thing to point out though is that these are not curved at all. The similar mounts that I got with my GoPro were a little bit curved, so they fit pretty well on the side of the helmet or on the top of the helmet. We'll see how well these things hold. I'm also interested that it came with a little remote control, and it looks like the functions that it's got are pretty simple. It's got a record button And it's got this camera button. I'm guessing this just toggles, maybe this takes a picture and that takes a video. We'll find out actually. Yes, I am a genius. That is exactly what it does because there are instructions right here in front of me. Here, I'm curious. This is my original GoPro. I want to see if it actually fits into these mounts. I feel like it's the same, definitely the same shape mount. We'll see if it's compatible. So the foot on this is very similar shape to the GoPro mount. I tried taking the GoPro and inserting it into these mounts and it didn't fit. I wonder if, however, this might actually fit onto existing GoPro mounts. It seems like that's what they were trying to do with it. So that just means if you've got some GoPro mounts, it's very possible that this will work with it. I've got one in a closet here that I'll pull out when I go to use the camera. All right, let's go ahead and power it on and take a look at the interface. All right, so just some quick impressions of the handling and the functionality of the unit. I haven't looked at the footage yet, I'm gonna do that later, but just some early impressions of the camera. So the UI is pretty straightforward and pretty usable, you know? Similar to other action cameras like this. The interface, the button interface is a little compromised just because, you know, they're working with very few buttons. And so you gotta do some playing around to figure out what does the power button do, what does the OK button do, and what do these up and down buttons do. So when you are in the normal shooting mode, up and down actually gives you like a little zooming function, which it's kind of cool. It's very, very minimal zoom. The quality of the screen on the back here is, ooh, it's not very good, but it is much better than the quality of the screen on my original GoPro because my original GoPro doesn't have a screen. Yeah, the screen on here is not great, but at least there is a screen and it's enough to let you preview what you're shooting. Frankly, that's all you're gonna need. Okay, so that's about as much as I can say about the Minigo 3 action camera without actually using it to take some video. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna take this on a motorcycle ride and I'm gonna take some footage and then I'll pull that footage onto my computer and I'll examine it and come back with impressions of the Minigo. I'll say right now, initial impressions are, I'm pretty impressed with the amount that you get for 50 bucks. All right, so I did a little motorcycle ride with the Minigo 3 action camera. Did a little bit of action camera shooting, little extreme sports. I don't think motorcycling is extreme sports. Anyway, I'll start with the positives, all right? As we saw during the unboxing, this thing comes with a ton of mounting hardware and all that is super useful. Even the carrying case is really nice. I love that it comes with all that stuff for 50 bucks. And then operation of the unit, it's pretty straightforward. You know, there's a little bit of confusing language in the menus, like some of the settings, instead of using the word off to turn the setting off, they use the word close, but those are little things that you can get used to. It's the 4th of July. I'm sorry for the fireworks sounds. I do think this might be a pretty decent little dash cam for a car. I mean, because one, it's inexpensive, but two, if you can actually use this without the battery. You can leave the battery out entirely, just have it connected to micro USB. And as soon as power starts coming to this thing, it'll turn itself on automatically. Now it won't start recording automatically. You would have to manually hit the record button, but I think that's actually a pretty convenient workflow. If you just had this mounted in your car, turn on the car, reach over and hit the button, you can do the job. And then supporting that dash cam functionality, the camera does have a loop function, which I assume the way that works is it'll record until you fill up the card and then it'll just start overwriting old footage. A lot of cameras like this have that function and this one's got it in the settings. I didn't get to play with it very much, but it's there and I assume it works. Now the not so great aspects of this. First thing, it took a really long time to charge this. I had this thing connected to a charger for like 2 or 3 hours and it still indicated that it was charging, like it hadn't finished charging after 2 to 3 hours. That was a long time. And then when I was out riding and recording footage, the battery lasted for about an hour, and half of that I was recording in 1080p 60, and the other half of that I was recording in 4K. I'm not sure which version or which recording mode requires more battery or if they're both the same, but expect roughly about an hour of record time per battery. So it's nice that it comes with 2 batteries, but if you're on a motorcycle, you're not really gonna be able to stop and swap batteries in the middle of your ride. And maybe it's okay that it's not great for a motorcycle because frankly, this is not a very good helmet camera. And then for 2 big reasons. The first big reason is that it's almost impossible to operate this thing when it's on your helmet. You know, I had a GoPro before that was difficult enough to operate, but at least I could hear it beeping through my helmet, so I knew when it would start recording. It had a specific beep that it did when it started recording. Now this thing does make some noises when you start recording, but I couldn't hear them through my helmet. To operate this thing, I had to take my helmet off, start the recording, put the helmet back on, and then I was confident that it was recording. One small thing that they could have done to address that is just have, you know, a red blinking light or something on it that lets you know that it's recording. Then you can, you know, peek down into the mirror of your motorcycle or whatever, use your smartphone to look at yourself and you could tell that it's recording, but it doesn't even have a blinking light on it. So there's no way to know that it's recording without looking at the back of this thing. And then the other reason that this thing's not a great helmet camera is that the angle of view is just, it's a little bit too narrow for my tastes. I'll show some footage here comparing this camera versus a GoPro Hero Session that I used to record basically the exact same ride just a few weeks ago. And you can see how big a difference the angle of view you get is. This is fairly narrow angle of view. And I think that it's probably okay if you're doing like a dash cam on your car, but it's not great for action camera or action sports, extreme sports. It's not the best for that. Now on to the really bad aspects of this thing. Unfortunately, the video quality is just not great. I started recording in 1080p 60, just because, you know, I do my videos in 1080p and 60 frames per second is generally the best way to get nice smooth footage. It just didn't look that great. You know, it's usable. It's certainly usable. And the 60 frames per second, it doesn't feel like 60 frames per second, but it's not bad. You'll see here, I'm gonna show you some of the footage so you can judge for yourself about the quality, but just in my opinion, the 1080p 60 footage, not great. And if the 1080p 60 footage is not great, oh, the 4K footage. I think the 4K footage from this camera is basically unusable. With the 4K footage, again, I'll show it to you so you can judge for yourself, but there are basically two big issues. Issue number one is the frame rate is not good. It says that it's 4K 30 frames per second. You can see the video for yourself. It's definitely not 30 frames per second. It might not even be 15 frames per second. It's pretty rough. And then the other big issue is that very frequently the video just kind of distorts or it gets broken up into a bunch of artifacts. And that's not a good look for a camera. You're just not really gonna be able to use that footage. So I think as a 1080p 60 camera, it's okay. It's not bad. As a 4K camera, I think it's pretty bad. But as long as you go into it knowing that that's a limitation, well, you might be able to get something out of this. So if I were to score the Minigo 3 action camera, I'd probably have to give it, I'd say 3 stars out of 5. And that might actually seem a little bit better than you expected, considering how bad the 4K footage is, but hear me out. I think for the price, you get a lot, right? For 50 bucks, you get a decent 1080p 60 camera, you get a ton of mounting accessories, you get a nice carrying case, and I think it could be a decent dash cam for a car. If you are getting this for the purposes of, let's say, motorcycling, snowboarding, underwater surfing, basket weaving, whatever extreme sport you're into, I think you're gonna be pretty disappointed with this camera, and I wouldn't recommend it for that. That said, if you are interested in checking out the Minigo 3 action camera, I do have a link to Amazon in the description down below. While you're down there, go ahead and hit that like button if you like this video. You can then subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next super review.